Jantric Kontho presents The Devotion of Suspect X. Novel by Keigo Higashino. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. If this is what you call logical thinking, I'd enjoy analyzing your brain. Functions one of these days. Monobu Yukawa, his cheek propped up on one hand, gave an exaggerated yawn. He'd taken off his smallish wireframe glasses some time ago and set them aside, as if to say, I won't be needing these. Which was probably true. Kusanagi had been sitting across from him, staring at the chessboard for over 20 minutes now, unable to think of a way to break out of his predicament. There was nowhere for his king to run. He couldn't even play the cornered rat and take out a piece or two of his opponents on his way down. He had considered every possible move by now, and each led straight to certain defeat. You know, chess really isn't my kind of game, Kusanagi muttered. Yukawa rolled his eyes. Here he goes again. First of all, what's all this about taking your opponent's pieces and not being able to use them? They are the spoils of war. Why can't I add them to my army? Don't go blaming the rules of the game. Besides, the fact of the matter is, your opponent's pieces aren't spoils, they are soldiers. When you take them off the board, you're killing them. Not much use for dead soldiers. But you can use them in shogi. Well, credit the man who thought up shogi for being so flexible. I suppose that when you capture pieces in shogi you're making them surrender, not killing them. That's why you get to use them again. Chess should be the same way. I don't think going turncoat sits well with the spirit of knighthood. Look, stop making lame excuses and look at the situation logically. You can only move one piece on your turn. And you have only a few pieces that actually can move, and none of those moves will do the slightest thing to stop me. Whatever you do, on my next move I will advance my knight, and checkmate. I give up. Kusanagi slumped in his chair. Chess is boring. With you, yes. Yukawa glanced at the clock on the wall. 42 minutes. And most of that was you thinking. I wonder how it is that a man such as yourself has so much time to waste here. Won't that hard-headed supervisor of yours chew you out? Nah, I just cleaned up this stalker murder case. Gotta take it easy a bit. Sometimes. Kusanagi reached for his dark-stained mug. The instant coffee Yukawa had offered him when he arrived had gone completely cold. At the moment, Yukawa and Kusanagi were the only ones in Lab 13 of the Imperial University Physics Department. The students had all stepped out for classes, which was precisely why Kusanagi had chosen this time to drop in. Kusanagi's cell phone rang in his pocket. Yukawa put on his white lab coat and grinned. See, they're onto you already. Kusanagi frowned as he looked at the incoming call display. It seemed Yukawa was right. The call was from a junior detective in his department. The crime scene was on the Tokyo side of the old Edogawa River, not far from a sewage treatment facility. Just across the water, on the river's other bank, was Chiba Prefecture. Why couldn't they have dumped it on the other side? Kusanagi wondered as he lifted up the collar of his coat against the cold. The body had been left on the side of the sloping embankment, wrapped in a blue plastic top of the kind often used in factory yards. An elderly man out for a jog along the river had called it in. He'd seen something that looked like a foot protruding from the top and had lifted the plastic for a peek. How old was the guy who found it? 75. He sure picked a frigid day to go for a run. Poor guy probably didn't expect to see something like this around here. My heart goes out to him. The junior detective, Kishitani, had arrived at the scene first. He'd explained the circumstances to Kusanagi. Now the older man frowned. The trailing edge of his long coat fluttered in the wind. So, Kishi, you see the body? I did, Kishitani said with a grimace. The chief wanted me to take a good long look at it. That's because he doesn't want to look at it himself. You want a peek, Kusanagi? Nope. I'll take your word for it on this one. According to Kishitani's report, the body had been left in a sorry state. It had been stripped of clothes, shoes, even socks. The face had been smashed. Like a split melon, the young detective had said, which was more than enough to make Kusanagi queasy. The fingers had been burned, too, completely destroying any fingerprints. The corpse was male. Marks around the neck indicated he had been strangled. There were no other wounds apparent on the rest of the body. I hope forensics finds something, Kusanagi said, pacing in a circle. With people watching, he thought it best to make a show of looking for clues, some lucky hint, something that might have belonged to the killer. The truth of the matter was that he left most of the crime scene examination to the specialists. He was unlikely to find anything of much importance himself. There was a bicycle nearby. Some people from the local station in Edogawa already came to pick it up. A bicycle? Probably trash somebody threw out. It was a little new for that. And both of the tires were flat. Someone put a hole in them with a nail or something. HMPH. The victims, then? Hard to say. It had a registration number on it, so we might be able to find out who owned it. Well, I hope it was the victims, Kusanagi said. Or else this is going to be a real tricky one. Heaven or hell. How's that? This your first John Doe, Kishi? Kishitani nodded. Think about it. The face and fingerprints were destroyed, which means that the killer didn't want anyone to know who the victim was. Of course. That also means, if we find out who the victim was, it should be easy to identify the killer. The question is how long it'll take us to figure out the poor bastard's identity. That right there's what determines our fate. Just then, Kishitani's cell phone rang. He took the call, talked briefly, then turned to Kusanagi. They want us down at the Edogawa station. Well, then, things are looking up, Kusanagi said. He stretched and straightened, massaging his lower back with clenched fists. When they reached the Edogawa police station, Mamaya was standing by the heater, warming his hands. Mamaya was their division chief in criminal affairs. Several men, probably local homicide, were scurrying around him, prepping the room to serve as investigation headquarters. You come in your own car today? Mamaya asked when he saw Kusanagi walk in. Sure did. Train station's too far away. You familiar with this part of town, then? I wouldn't say familiar, but I've been here a few times. So you don't need a guide. Good. Take Kishitani with you and go. Here. He held out a piece of paper. It was a memo with an address in Shinozaki, Edogawa Ward, beneath which was written a woman's name, Yoko Yamabe. Who's this? Kusanagi asked. You tell him about the bicycle? Mamaya asked Kishitani. Yes, sir. You mean the bicycle they found near the body? Kusanagi inquired, peering into the chief's rugged face. That's the one. We checked it out and found a stolen bicycle report. The registration numbers match. That Ms. Yamabe's the owner. I had someone give her a ring to make sure she's home. I want you to go over there, get her to identify the bike and hear what she has to say. You get any fingerprints from the bicycle? Don't you worry about that for now. Just get going, Mamaya growled. his voice pushing them out the door. Great, the bike was stolen. I figured it was something like that. Kusanagi clicked his tongue as he guided his car out into the street. He was driving a black Skyline, the same car he'd had for almost 8 years now. You think the killer took the bicycle and left it there? Maybe. But asking the owner's not going to do us much good. It's not like she knows who stole her bike. Though we might get a glimpse of the path the killer took that day, which is something. Following the memo and a map, Kusanagi drove around Shinozaki, the two detectives hunting for the address. Finally they found it, a modern-looking place with white walls. A nameplate by the door read, Yamabe. Yoko Yamabe was a housewife in her mid-40s. Her makeup looked newly applied. She'd probably put it on when she heard that detectives would be coming. No doubt about it, that's my bicycle, she announced crisply when Kusanagi showed her a photograph he'd gotten from forensics. I was hoping you could come down to the station and identify it in person. I'd be happy to. I'm getting it back, right? Of course. However, our colleagues at the station are still looking into a few things, so you might have to wait until they're done. Oh, but I need it back right now. It's almost impossible going shopping without it, she said, her brow furrowing with disappointment. The tone of her voice made it sound as if she blamed the police for her bicycle having been stolen in the first place. Kusanagi sighed inwardly. He knew the type. He could just see her down at the station, demanding that they pay to fix her punctured tires. For a fleeting moment he considered telling her that the bicycle had been used in connection with a murder, just to see how quickly she lost interest in ever riding the thing again. According to her, the bike had been stolen the day before, in other words, on March 10th, sometime between 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. She had gone out to meet a friend in Ginza, gone shopping and had dinner, and by the time she'd returned to Shinozaki Station, it was already past 10 o'clock at night. She had taken the bus home. Did you leave the bicycle in the lot? No, along the sidewalk. And it was locked? Of course. I attached it to the guardrail with a chain. Kusanagi hadn't heard anyone mention finding a chain lock at the scene. He gave Ms. Yamabe a ride down to Shinozaki Station to see the spot where the bicycle had been stolen. It was right around here, she said, indicating a section of sidewalk about 20 yards from the small supermarket in front of the station. There were a few bicycles lined up there now. Kusanagi looked around. There was a bank branch office nearby, and a bookstore. There probably would have been quite a bit of pedestrian traffic during the day and early evening. Someone crafty enough could have cut the chain quickly during that time and taken the bike as though it were there. Oh, but it was far more likely that the deed had been done later, after the streets had cleared somewhat. Next, the detectives brought Ms. Yamabe down to the Edogawa police station to identify the bicycle. I think I'm just unlucky, you know, Kusanagi heard her saying from the back seat. I only bought that bicycle last month. I was so mad when I realized it had been stolen that I went and filed a report at the police box by the station before I even got on the bus. And you knew the registration number? That's impressive. Well, I'd only just bought the thing. I still had the receipt at my house. I called and had my daughter tell me the number. I see. Good thinking. I was wondering, just what sort of case is this? The man on the phone didn't give any details. But I have to admit all this has me very curious. Well, we're not even sure there really is a case just yet. I'm afraid we don't have the details. What? Really? She snorted. I didn't know you police types were so tight-lipped about these things. In the passenger seat, Kishitani was trying to keep from laughing. Kusanagi was glad he had gone to visit the woman today and not later. If the murder had already become public knowledge, he would have had to suffer through a deluge of questions. Ms. Yamate took one look at the bicycle down in the evidence room at Edogawa Station and ID'd it on the spot. Then she turned to Kusanagi and asked who was going to pay for repairing her tires. The forensics team got several fingerprints off the bicycle's handlebars, frame, and seat. They had found other evidence as well. What they thought to be the victim's clothes had turned up, stuffed into a 5-gallon oil can, several hundred yards from the place where the body was found. The clothes were partially burned. There was a jacket, a sweater, pants, socks, and underwear. Forensics guessed that the killer had set fire to the clothes and then left. But the fire had gone out before finishing the job, and they hadn't burned as well as he had hoped. There was nothing special about the style or manufacture of the clothes. All of them were standard designs, common throughout the country. A police artist had used the clothing and the shape of the victim's body to draw an approximation of how he had looked before he was killed. Some policemen had already been to Shinozaki Station, illustration in hand, to ask around. However, without anything distinctive about either the person or the clothes, they had gathered no information of any worth. A picture of the illustration went up on the nightly news that evening, and a mountain of calls came in, but none of them offered any positive link to the body from beside the old Edogawa. Meanwhile, the police had compared everything they knew about the victim to the missing persons list, but they were unable to find even the thinnest thread connecting anyone to their John Doe. Only a survey of hotels and hostels in the Edogawa area, checking to see if any single men had abruptly disappeared, turned up something of merit. A customer staying at a place in Kameido called Rental Room Ogiya had gone missing on March 11th, the day the body was found. When he hadn't shown up at the desk at checkout time, one of the staff had gone to check the room and had found it empty, save for a few of the man's personal belongings. The manager hadn't bothered to inform the police because the customer had already paid in advance. Forensics descended on the place immediately, picking up every fingerprint and loose piece of hair. Finally they struck gold. One of the hairs was a perfect match with those on the body. There were also fingerprints on the walls and belongings that matched those from the stolen bicycle. The missing man had signed his name in the rental room's guest book, Shinji Togashi. His address was listed as being in West Shinjuku, Shinjuku Ward.